I don't know who's worse, Prince Harry or Gary Lineker. Two of the most overprivileged, disconnected people on the planet. Both have received vast sums of money from the taxpayer. Both are unspeakably arrogant. We'll get to Prince Harry later, but I'm not going to let Gary slip under the radar and slither off the hook. So this week, Grant Shapps warned Gary to stick to football.
Why does Gary Lineker wind this lot up so much?
Your reaction to Mr Lineker's view of the proposed Rwanda policy?
I honestly think it'd be much better if he stuck to commenting on football.
Gary joined a load of other out-of-touch celebrities in signing a letter calling for the Rwanda plan to be scrapped. They want our political leaders to come up with a new plan for refugees. Sounds perfectly plausible. The letter describes Britain's refugee system as uncaring, chaotic and costly, accusing the government of trying to banish people to Rwanda. There's nothing wrong with Rwanda. But you see, the problem with people like Gary is that they object to everything. They object to turning the boats back. They object to migrants housed in barges. They object to migrants housed in detention centres. They object to migrant houses housed in hotels. Need I go on? Short of just opening the borders, you name it, they'll argue against it. And like all these people, they are, of course, out of ideas of their own, which is typical. They've even objected to the words that we use, which is odd, because when Gary compared ex-Home Secretary Suella Braverman's language to that of 1930s Germany when the Nazis were in charge, you'd have thought that he would come out and condemn an actual massacre of Jewish people by Hamas. But oddly, Gary stayed silent. I'm not complaining if he keeps his trap shut, but the thing is, he later on piped up support for Palestine. Some consistency would be good. Jonathan Gullis MP tweeted in relation to the letter that this was yet another breach of the BBC impartiality rules. Gary replied, telling him to read the new guidelines or get someone to read them for him. Gary also hit back at Grant Shapps in his comment when he told him to stick to football, saying it was a tad rich coming from someone who can't even stick to one name. For chaps, Shapps, he called him. Well, his signing the letter wasn't a breach. According to the BBC guidelines, Gary is not allowed to criticise individual politicians in the UK. So what was that then? For chaps, Shapps. Sounds like a direct breach to me. But will spineless Tim Davie act? Surely Gary cannot squirm his way out of this one. This isn't about freedom of speech. This is about a contract. If you sign a contract, an employment contract, or make a deal with your employer agreeing not to directly criticise politicians, and then you just do that anyway, then you would have, in my view, breached your agreement. The BBC's new incoming chair, Samir Shah, told MPs on Wednesday that social media posts by Gary Lineker may have breached the BBC guidelines. He said a row between the presenter of Match of the Day and several Tory MPs, including Defence Secretary Grant Shapps, was not very helpful, either for Gary Lineker or the BBC or the cause he supports, because it becomes a story about Gary Lineker and the BBC. The problem is that the general public are paying Gary's salary via the licence fee, which, if they fail to pay, are jailed. To my knowledge, Gary is the highest paid person at the BBC, and that comes with responsibility. His behaviour is one of the reasons why the BBC are losing favour with the general public. So whilst Gary may think that all this stuff with Prince Harry will overshadow his antics, I haven't forgotten, and neither have the British public. In the words of Lee Anderson, Gary put a sock in it.